Remember what I told you about the borderline? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. If you have not done so already, I would encourage you to watch my videos in relation to the borderline. There is the video, The Borderline, where I pose the question, what is the borderline? Distant relative of the narcissist or close cousin, or something else altogether? I also put forward the observation why the borderline is not what you think, and to provide further detail in relation to Amber Heard, I asked the question, is she a borderline and a histrionic as a consequence of the diagnosis that she was given by a psychologist? I'd invite you to watch those videos for a detailed explanation. But put simply, I have explained that when it comes to individuals that are identified as borderline, some of those individuals are actually misdiagnosed as an individual that has post-traumatic stress disorder. And many of those individuals are actually narcissists. And for reasons that I won't repeat here, but I made plain in my videos about the borderline, there are certain societal reasons why the term borderline has been used rather than the more accurate narcissist. I have essentially put forward the suggestion that the term borderline ought to be done away with, and instead that individuals who hitherto have been described as such be properly diagnosed as those that have post-traumatic stress disorder or that they're narcissists. And invariably, those that are narcissists would fall within my classification as being mid-range. Now, interestingly, in light of those observations, which I made a number of years ago, a recent article has appeared in the Daily Mail, where it explains thousands of children and young adults in the United Kingdom with serious mental illness are being denied the help they need because doctors label them as difficult and attention-seeking, experts claim. Leading medics are now calling for an immediate ban on youngsters being classed as having borderline personality disorder, BPD, a condition in which they are often considered emotionally unstable and even manipulative. Experts say the diagnosis, although recognized as a medical condition, encourages mental health staff to treat patients as troublesome rather than in need of specialist psychiatric care. Now, pausing there, it would be advantageous if an appropriate diagnosis were made at an early juncture to determine that those that are in this grouping are either those with post-traumatic stress disorder, and therefore they can receive the appropriate care that they require, and the others as narcissists, who, of course, as you know, are resistant to treatment. I've made it abundantly clear that the narcissist can never change. The narcissism is a fixed, pathologically entrenched self-defense mechanism. Any individual that claims that they were a narcissist and now they've been cured was either not a narcissist to begin with and was something else and they were mistaken, or they remain a narcissist and they're simply trying to convince you that they've changed their ways as part of their ongoing manipulations. Narcissists do not change. Thus, by identifying those that hitherto would have been described as borderline and categorizing them as those with post-traumatic stress disorder and those with narcissism, with narcissistic personality disorder, it would allow services to be in a better position to allocate resources appropriately. The article continues by stating, in some cases, doctors ignore warnings that patients with BPD are planning to harm or kill themselves because they believe they are making it up. Now, in some instances, Those individuals that issue a threat to harm or kill themselves are narcissists who are doing so for the purposes of seeking to assert control over that relevant doctor, for the purposes of trying to bring them under control and to receive fuel from them by way of a reaction to their threat to harm themselves. I've explained in extensive detail how the mid-range narcissist is the biggest user of threat, and therefore it is entirely commensurate with the behavior of these narcissists who are misdiagnosed as borderline as being stated to be individuals who that are planning to harm or kill themselves. They are mid-range narcissists that are using threat as a manipulation. Understandably, certain service providers believe that they are empty threats. As a result, the article continues, many are denied treatment with drugs or counselling that might help. This is despite the fact that studies show up to 1 in 10 people with BPD symptoms end up committing suicide. I've also explained separately in a video about narcissists and suicide that whilst a narcissist can commit suicide, it is fairly rare. Watch the video to understand why that is. In the instances here, you'll be talking about individuals that have post-traumatic stress disorder that are more likely to engage in suicidal ideation and carry out the actual threat to do so. Indeed, it's more likely that they won't actually issue a threat because they're not manipulative. Hundreds of senior medics have signed a letter to the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, demanding the term be scrapped. It warns that doctors are telling young patients they have a flawed personality, when many actually have severe mental illness triggered by trauma. The letter, signed by former Health Minister Sir Norman Lamb, as well as leading psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and mental health nurses, states, "Until there is conclusive proof that this diagnosis does not harm children, we say it should not occur in the United Kingdom." An estimated 8,000 patients a year in England alone are treated on the NHS for suspected BPD. Sufferers find their emotions confusing and hard to control. They struggle with relationships and experience disturbed thoughts. They often have a deep-rooted fear of being abandoned, threat to control, and can act impulsively. It's diagnosed by a 9-point symptom list. If patients have 5 or more, they are labelled as having BPD. An estimated 1.5 million people in the United Kingdom meet BPD criteria, but research shows many mental health professionals treat them differently to those they consider to have a genuine problem. In a study, University of Wisconsin researchers interviewed 22 psychiatrists to get their views on BPD patients. The results, published in the journal Social Science and Medicine, found most described them as difficult and did their best to get them out of their clinics as soon as possible. What they're actually dealing with are narcissists. Narcissists who are untreatable. Narcissists who are difficult because any attempt to treat them is seen as a threat to control by the narcissism, resulting in a response which seeks to nullify that threat to control. One even told researchers in professional circles borderline is often synonymous with pain in the ass. In 2022, the Royal College of Psychiatrists advertised a course for its members which described personality disorder as a thorn in the flesh of many clinicians. These people are treated really badly, says Keir Harding, an occupational health therapist and mental health specialist who has campaigned for several years for the BPD label to be scrapped. Yet many have lived through neglect, trauma and abuse. Mental health services are letting them down. Liv Johnson, 25, from Herefordshire, has experience of this. She suffered abuse as a child, which led to an eating disorder in her teens. At 15, she was admitted as a psychiatric inpatient after self-harming and taking an overdose. It was only when she got her discharge letter 2 months later that Liv realised doctors had labelled her as having BPD. "I don't remember any assessment for it, or it ever being mentioned by staff," she told the Mail on Sunday. One time she self-harmed, she says. A&E staff denied her medical treatment due to her BPD diagnosis. They said they wouldn't stitch my wound because I was a self-harmer who wanted the attention of having stitches, says Liv, who now works as a mental health peer support worker. When she was 22, doctors finally changed her diagnosis to complex post-traumatic stress disorder to take account of her childhood traumas. And pausing there, this demonstrates the point that I have made on numerous occasions. There are those who have BPD or have been described as having BPD when in actual fact it's post-traumatic stress disorder. It then meant that she could finally access the therapy she had been denied as a BPD sufferer. Angela Mays, aged 73, from Hull, lost her 22-year-old daughter Sally to suicide in 2014 after staff at an NHS mental health unit refused to admit her, even though she tried to strangle herself in front of them. A hearing was later told that one of the nurses said, "Leave her, she will faint before she dies." Sally, who had a history of eating disorders and depression, ended her life at home a few hours later. Retired management consultant Angela insists her daughter was not taken seriously because she had been diagnosed with BPD. It's a stigmatizing term. Most doctors think of it as behavioral disorder. I was told by an NHS psychotherapist that my daughter wasn't really ill at all, even though she'd been in and out of hospital for 3 years. Dr. Lade Smith, president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, said, "The care of children with mental health needs is of paramount importance. We work with experts to ensure they get the best quality mental health care possible." Thus, this article demonstrates that, once again, the suggestion that BPD be maintained as an actual diagnosis ought to be done away with. This is in accordance with what I have said and consistently stated for some time, that in actual fact there are those that are labelled with BPD for reasons which I have explained in my videos about the borderline, when in actual fact many of them are actually narcissists, and there are a proportion who are individuals, as was the individual by way of example in the article, of people who suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder. That there are certain cultural influences which means that borderline is actually a term for narcissist light, because of the desire to avoid a certain stigmatizing approach, because of the stigma that is associated with labeling someone as having narcissistic personality disorder. Thus, what I have maintained all along with regard to how borderline should be done away with and how it should be recategorized as those with post-traumatic stress disorder and others with NPD is something which is entirely appropriate. And this latest report only goes to support something that I've maintained for quite some time. What are your thoughts in that regard? Do you agree with me that borderline should be done away with, that the individuals that are diagnosed as such are indeed either narcissists or people with post-traumatic stress disorder? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.